Good evening, everyone. Before we dive into tonight's stories, please remember to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. The more you interact, the more these spine-tingling tales will find their way back into your feed. Now, let's step into the shadows together. When I hit 16, I honestly believed babysitting was the easiest gig on the planet. You basically get paid to chill in someone else's living room, hog their TV, raid their snack stash, and make sure their kid doesn't try to electrocute himself with a fork. Piece of cake. Right. That's how it always played out for me. Anyway, until I started working for the Callahans. They lived in this old-fashioned two-story house way out on the edge of Dayton, Ohio, the kind of place that looks perfectly normal from the street. Tidy porch, a couple of potted plants, brand new shutters. But the moment you stepped inside, the air just felt thicker, like it had soaked up all the unspoken arguments and secrets you weren't meant to hear. Mr. and Mrs. Callahan had one child, a son named Mason. He was maybe 9 years old, super skinny, pale as a ghost, and polite to the point of being almost robotic. When I first met him, he shook my hand like some miniature adult and said, "Nice to meet you." No smile, no giggle, just rehearsed. His mom laid down the ground rules for me in this really clipped, serious voice. No soda, no candy, no TV after 8 p.m. And under no circumstances, she actually repeated it twice, was Mason allowed anywhere near the basement. That last bit threw me for a loop. I asked, "Is the basement dangerous or something?" She plastered on this smile that felt way too quick and fake. "Oh, it's just storage. He knows better than to go down there." I just shrugged it off. Weird parents, strict rules, not my problem. The first 2 hours went by without a hitch. Mason was glued to the kitchen table, buried in a book that was way too advanced for a kid his age, while I half-watched some sitcom rerun in the living room. Every now and then, he'd glance at the clock like he was waiting for something to happen. Then, right around 7:30, I heard it. A soft, dragging sound coming from beneath the floorboards, like something heavy being pulled across concrete. I initially thought it was just pipes or some ancient furnace kicking on, but then I noticed Mason's hands were trembling, his knuckles white as he gripped the pages of his book. He didn't look surprised at all. He looked absolutely terrified. I asked him, "What was that noise?" He shook his head really fast. "Nothing. Don't worry about it." But he wouldn't even look at me. Another scrape echoed up through the vent, louder this time, followed by 3 really solid thumps. Mason's knuckles went even whiter as he squeezed the book tighter. Then he whispered something so quiet, I almost didn't catch it. "Please, don't open the basement door!" Honestly, I hadn't even considered doing that until he said it. The hallway light above the basement stairs flickered once, then went back to normal. My chest tightened up. Maybe the Callahans were actually down there. Maybe that's why they warned me. But no, that was impossible. They'd left for dinner. I watched them drive away myself. I tried to play it cool, laugh it off. Old houses make weird noises, trust me. But Mason didn't laugh. He slammed his book shut and just stared at the kitchen doorway. I couldn't just ignore it anymore. I walked into the hallway, flipped on the light switch, and stood at the top of the stairs. The basement door was closed, but not all the way. There was just a tiny crack, like someone had closed it really gently without the latch actually catching, and the air that was drifting up through that little gap was ice cold. I called down, "Hello." No answer, just silence. For a split second, I thought about texting my mom to come pick me up, but then Mason's voice cut through the quiet. It was shaking and small. "If you open it, they'll know." I turned back to him. Who will? He didn't answer. He just covered his ears with both hands like he was bracing himself for a sound I hadn't heard yet. Another scrape echoed up from below. This one was right against the bottom step, like something was dragging itself closer. That was when the door started to move, slowly, steadily, like someone on the other side was pressing it open, inch by inch. The basement door creaked open a little more, groaning softly on its old hinges. I froze halfway down the hall, my breath catching in my throat. Mason hadn't moved from the kitchen, but I could see his small body hunched over, hands still clamped over his ears. Something inside me just wanted to slam that door shut, lock it tight, and pretend I hadn't heard any of this. But babysitting means protecting the kid, and right then, Mason looked like he was trying to disappear right into the floor. I called out again, my voice tighter this time. Mr. Callahan, Mrs. Callahan. Still no answer. Instead, I heard a low, wet cough echoing up from the bottom of the stairs. It wasn't the kind of cough someone makes when they're clearing their throat. This one was rattling, like it was coming from deep inside the chest of someone who shouldn't even be breathing anymore. I felt goosebumps pop up all over my arms. Mason suddenly screamed from behind me, "Close it, please!" That was enough for me. I shoved the door with my shoulder, and it banged shut with a loud thud. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Mason flinched so hard his chair tipped over. He scrambled to his feet, eyes wide with terror, and whispered, "Now they'll come." My pulse was pounding in my ears. I asked him, "Who's down there? Mason?" His lips trembled before he finally answered, "My dad says they're family." That word just hit me wrong. Family. I wanted to press him, demand more answers, but before I could, there was a new sound. It wasn't scraping this time, not coughing, knuckles. A slow, deliberate knock against the inside of the basement door. Once, twice, then a pause, like whoever was down there wanted me to lean in closer, to listen. Mason started crying quietly, covering his mouth with both hands to try and muffle the sound. I stepped closer to him, trying to stay calm. "It's okay," I lied. "The door's locked. They can't get out." But I hadn't actually checked if it was locked. I had to know. I turned back toward the door, my hands shaking as I reached for the knob. My fingers barely brushed it when Mason screamed, "Don't!" The knob jerked violently in my hand. Cold metal twisted hard under my grip, like someone was yanking on it from the other side. I staggered back just as the door rattled against its frame. Whoever was down there was strong. Way too strong. I shouted, "I'm calling the police," even though my phone was sitting on the counter in the other room. The door went still. Silence hung heavy in the air, thick enough that I almost started to believe it was over. Then, through that thin piece of wood, I heard a voice. A woman's voice. Low, raspy, way too close. "Let me see my boy." Mason just collapsed to the floor, sobbing into his knees. I didn't even think. I grabbed him, dragged him toward the living room, and snatched my phone off the counter. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hit the numbers. As I dialed 911, the voice came again, louder this time, rattling the walls. "He's mine. He's mine." Mason clawed at my sleeve, begging me not to call. "They'll be mad. They'll hurt us." But I hit send anyway, pressing the phone to my ear. My voice cracked as I tried to explain to the 911 operator what was happening. While I was speaking, the basement door burst open. It didn't just swing open, it exploded against the wall, slamming so hard that a picture frame shattered off its hook. Cold air rushed through the house, carrying with it the stench of mildew and something far, far worse. Something rotten. I'll never forget what I saw standing at the top of those stairs. Not a ghost, not a monster, but a woman. Skin pale and eyes wild. Her wrists bruised raw like she'd been held in shackles. She looked almost like Mason. Same sharp jawline, same hollow cheeks, but the way she smiled at him made my stomach lurch. "Mason," she said sweetly, "Mommy's home." When I was a sophomore in high school, I got invited to my friend Ellie's house for dinner. She was new in town, pretty quiet, and the type of girl who always seemed tired, but never said why. I just figured she needed a friend. And when she asked me to come over, I said yes without even thinking twice. The Millers lived in one of those picture-perfect suburban neighborhoods outside Indianapolis. Every lawn was perfectly trimmed, every driveway spotless, every porch light glowing the same soft white. When I pulled up to their place, their two-story colonial looked like it was straight out of a home decor magazine. Bright shutters, American flag waving proudly, flower beds neat and symmetrical. But the second I stepped inside, I realized just how fake it all was. Family photos covered every single wall. Not just a few, but hundreds. Each frame was identical, a matching silver finish. Ellie, her parents, and her little brother were smiling wide in each one, all dressed in perfectly pressed clothes, posing stiffly like mannequins. And in every single photo, the father's hand was clamped down on the kid's shoulders like a vice. Mrs. Miller greeted me with a grin that never actually reached her eyes. She said, "We're so glad you're here, dear. You'll be part of tonight's picture." I thought she was joking, but when we sat down for dinner, I noticed an expensive-looking camera already set up on a tripod in the corner of the room, pointed directly at the table. Dinner started normal enough. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. But the way the Millers were acting just made my skin crawl. They weren't just talking, they were performing. Every single time Mr. Miller spoke, his wife and kids froze until he was finished. Then they all nodded together in perfect unison, like it was a rehearsed choreography. Halfway through the meal, he suddenly announced, "Time for the picture." Immediately, the whole family stood up and positioned themselves carefully behind their chairs. Mrs. Miller adjusted Ellie's hair, tugged her brother's collar straight, then turned to me. Her smile widened unnaturally. "You stand right next to Ellie. We want you to feel like family." I laughed nervously, but no one else did. The camera's self-timer beeped, and just before the flash went off, "Mr. Miller hissed through clenched teeth, "Smile." The light flashed, capturing me mid-smile, surrounded by frozen grins that looked more like grimaces. We all sat back down, and I thought it was finally over. But just 10 minutes later, he did it again. "Time for another picture." And again, and again. Every few minutes, he'd bark out the order for another family photo. Each time, the tension in the room grew thicker and heavier. By the fourth picture, my jaw was actually aching from forcing a smile. Ellie's little brother's lip was trembling uncontrollably, but the second the camera beeped, his face snapped back into place like he'd been shocked into obedience. I leaned towards Ellie and whispered, "Do you guys always do this?" She didn't even answer. Her fork scraped against her plate mechanically. Her eyes glazed over. The seventh photo came, then the eighth. By the ninth, Mr. Miller slammed his hand down on the table so hard that the dishes rattled. He snarled, "Ellie, your smile was wrong again." Ellie flinched, tears welling up in her eyes instantly, but she stood up straight and forced her face back into a wide, painful grin. Her father loomed over her, whispering something low and sharp that I couldn't quite make out. Her little brother's hands were shaking so badly that his fork clattered to the floor. I wanted to leave right then and there, but before I could even say anything, Mrs. Miller's cheerful voice cut in. "Just one more photo, dear. Then we'll be perfect." She looked straight at me, and in that moment, I realized I wasn't just a guest. I was now part of their twisted performance. The camera beeped again, that tiny mechanical chirp that made the entire room go dead silent. Mr. Miller's hand gripped Ellie's shoulder so tightly I actually saw her wince in pain. I forced my smile, my heart pounding in my chest, but it was impossible to ignore how wrong everything felt. The flash went off, freezing us all in that grotesque tableau of painted-on happiness. Then Ellie's brother started to cry. Just a quiet whimper at first, the kind any kid might make if he was overtired or upset. Mr. Miller snapped his head toward him. "Stop it!" The boy tried, pressing his lips together tightly, but the tears just wouldn't stop. His father stood towering over him and barked again. "Smile now." The boy's face twisted up, half sob, half forced grin. It was honestly one of the most horrifying things I'd ever seen in my life. A child trying desperately to obey while his own body betrayed him. I whispered, "Maybe we should just take a break." Mrs. Miller's eyes cut towards me, sharp and warning. "We don't take breaks. Not until it's perfect." The next photo was even worse. The boy's eyes were red and wet, his smile barely even there. Mr. Miller cursed under his breath and grabbed him by the back of the neck, yanking him upright so hard that his chair toppled over. "Do you want to ruin this family?" he hissed. My stomach lurched. I pushed my chair back, ready to stand up and leave, but Mrs. Miller's hand shot out and pressed down hard against mine. Her nails dug into my skin as she whispered through her frozen smile, "Sit down. One more picture." The flash went off again, and in that second, I saw it clearly. This wasn't dinner. It was a ritual, a punishment, a cycle they just couldn't break free from. Ellie's eyes darted to mine, pleading silently for help. When the flash faded, Mr. Miller leaned in close to me. His smile never faltered for even a second. "You're part of this family tonight. That means you follow the rules." The words just chilled me to the bone. I muttered something about my mom expecting me home, and I started fumbling around for my phone. But before I could even unlock it, Mr. Miller plucked it right out of my hands and set it face down on the table. "No distractions." Ellie's little brother let out another sob. This time, Mr. Miller slammed his fist down on the table so hard that the salt shaker burst open, sending salt everywhere. He roared, "We'll keep taking pictures until he learns." The boy just collapsed into shaking, uncontrollable tears. And that's when I finally realized what those hundreds of photos on the wall really were. Not happy memories, not milestones, but evidence, proof of their control. Each smile forced, each frame a chilling record of their obedience. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I just had to get out of there. The camera beeped again. Everyone froze. Mr. Miller grabbed Ellie's chin, jerking her face upward into a wide, painful grin. Her brother's sobs hiccuped into silence as he tried again to force a smile, his lips trembling, and Mrs. Miller turned to me. "Smile, dear," she whispered. The flash went off, capturing me in their prison. I didn't stay for another one. The second the picture snapped, I shoved my chair back, grabbed my phone, and bolted for the door. Behind me, I heard Ellie scream her father's name, then a crash, like the tripod toppling over. I didn't look back, I just ran down their perfect little street until my legs gave out. It's been years since that night. Ellie transferred schools not long after. I never saw her again. But sometimes, late at night, I dream that I'm back in that house, blinded by the flash, trapped in a photo I never agreed to take. And I wonder how many more pictures they forced her into after I left. I always used to think my mom just had trouble sleeping. Some nights I'd wake up to the sound of her pacing around in the kitchen, the floorboards creaking under her footsteps, cabinet doors opening and shutting softly. I figured it was just stress. You know, bills, work, the struggles of single parenting. But then one night, she opened my bedroom door at 2:30 in the morning and whispered, "Get dressed. We're going for a ride." I thought she was joking. Who takes their kid on a joy ride in the middle of the night? But when I sat up, she was already holding her car keys in one hand and a travel mug in the other. "Now," she said. I pulled on some jeans and sneakers, still half asleep, and followed her out to the car. The air outside was damp, smelling like rain that just hadn't quite started yet. She drove in total silence, one hand gripping the steering wheel tightly, the other drumming against her coffee mug. The radio stayed off. No music, just the sound of the engine and the occasional rattle when she hit a pothole. At first, it felt kind of weird, but not exactly scary. Just quiet roads, the lights of gas stations blinking past, my mom sipping her coffee while I chewed on a candy bar she tossed at me. She didn't explain where we were going, and I didn't ask. The first few nights, it almost felt like a secret adventure, like we were sneaking out together. But by the third or fourth time, I started to notice a pattern. She wasn't just driving randomly. She always slowed way down when we entered residential neighborhoods. She'd dim the headlights, roll past houses, her eyes darting from window to window, and sometimes she'd stop completely. The first time it happened, it was in a cul-de-sac I'd never even been to before. She cut the engine and just sat there, staring at a little brick house across the street. The living room lights were still on, and through the curtains, you could see a man holding a toddler, bouncing him gently, while a woman stacked blocks back into a basket. My mom leaned forward over the steering wheel, her breath fogging up the glass. "That's what it's supposed to look like," she whispered. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, hands in my lap, watching her watch them. It just kept happening. Every drive, she'd pick a house. Sometimes we'd stay for 10 minutes, sometimes for an hour. She never knocked, never got out of the car, just watched. I started noticing the things she'd mutter under her breath, half sentences, broken whispers. "She doesn't deserve him. He would have come back to me. That should have been me." It made my stomach twist up in knots because I finally realized who she was watching. The man was my father. He'd left years before. I hadn't seen him since I was 8 years old. He had a new wife now, a new family, and my mother just hadn't moved on. Not even close. That blue house with the swing set in the backyard, that was his house. The night she parked there, I recognized him instantly. He stepped out onto the porch to smoke, and even from across the street, the shape of him just punched me right in the gut. Older, a little thicker around the middle, but still my dad. My mom's nails dug into the steering wheel hard enough that I thought she might actually snap it in half. She whispered, "She stole everything from me." I wanted to look away, but she grabbed my chin and forced me to keep watching. "See, that should have been us. That should have been our life." I tried to argue with her once. I said, "He left. Mom, he doesn't want." Her hand whipped out and smacked my arm. Not quite a slap, but hard enough to sting. "Don't you dare say that he was tricked. He'll realize it one day. He'll realize it." From then on, I just didn't argue anymore. I just sat there, my heart pounding in my chest, while she stalked his house night after night. But she wasn't content to just watch. She started bringing things with her: a disposable camera, a notebook where she scribbled down license plate numbers. Once, she even shoved a baseball bat under the passenger seat, and then she started making me help her. Take a picture. Write that down. Keep your eyes on the window. The first time I refused to do it, her grip clamped around my wrist so tight I thought it might actually break. Her voice dropped to a low hiss. Don't you want your father back? Too. That was when I realized these weren't just random midnight drives. They were rehearsals. By the time spring rolled around, the drives had become a routine. Every Friday night, I'd go to bed with my shoes tucked under the blanket, already dressed, because I knew she'd be coming for me. She always did. That April night, though, just felt different. She was more wound up than usual, tapping her fingers on the steering wheel in this frantic rhythm as we pulled into the familiar cul-de-sac. My father's house was glowing at the far end, the porch light on, the blinds cracked just enough to see shadows moving inside. My stomach just sank. I whispered, "Can we please not do this tonight?" She didn't answer. She just reached under her seat and pulled out the baseball bat. The sight of it in her lap made my chest seize up. "Mom!" "Shh!" She snapped at me. "It's time." The way she said it made my blood run cold. We just sat there in the dark, watching. Through the window, I saw my dad's wife, Amanda. I'd learned her name from overhearing their conversations, laughing as she set a plate of food down on the table. Their little boy toddled across the floor, clutching a stuffed dinosaur. My dad lifted him into his arms, spinning him around. My mom's breath came out sharp and ragged. "That was supposed to be you!" I swallowed hard. "Please, let's just go home." She turned to me then, and her eyes were wild and unfocused. "Don't you want him back? Don't you want our family whole again?" I didn't answer. My throat was too tight. She shoved the bat into my hands. The cold metal pressed against my palms, heavier than I expected it to be. "Hold this." I froze. "Why?" Her smile was thin and trembling. "Because when I knock on that door, you're coming with me." Panic just shot through me. "Mom, stop. You can't do this." But she was already out of the car. The door clicked shut behind her, and she stalked across the street, her hair whipping around in the wind, her eyes locked on that glowing window. I sat there trembling, clutching the bat in my hands, every instinct in my body screaming at me to just run. But if I ran, if I left her there alone, what would she do? She reached the porch and raised her fist. For one awful second, I thought she was actually going to smash the window. Instead, she knocked on the door. 3 hard raps echoing down the quiet street. My father appeared in the doorway, looking confused, holding the little boy on his hip. When he saw her standing there, he just froze. His voice carried low and sharp. "What are you doing here?" My mom's reply was a hiss that I could barely even hear from inside the car. "That's my life. That's my family." Amanda appeared behind him, her face tightening when she recognized my mom. She grabbed his arm, urging him to come back inside. That's when my mother lunged forward, shoving the door with both hands. The little boy cried out, startled. Amanda screamed. My dad blocked the entry, shoving my mom back, but she clawed at him, shrieking and yelling. I stumbled out of the car, my heart hammering in my chest, the bat slipping from my hands and falling onto the asphalt. Neighbors' porch lights blinked on one by one as the yelling escalated. "Go home," my dad roared. My mom's voice cracked, high and broken. "He was mine. He'll always be mine." Amanda pulled the little boy back further into the house as my dad finally managed to force the door shut, locking it tight. My mom pounded her fists against the wood, screaming so loud that it echoed across the cul-de-sac. I just stood there, frozen, ashamed, and terrified. She looked over at me then, tears streaking her face, and whispered, "Why didn't you help me?" Sirens wailed in the distance. That was the last drive. Child Protective Services came within the week. I was placed in the custody of my aunt. I never lived with my mom again. But sometimes, late at night, when headlights sweep across my bedroom window, I jolt awake, completely convinced that she's parked outside, waiting to take me on one more ride. And in my dreams, I can still hear her whisper those haunting words. That was supposed to be us. I was 16 years old the first time I spent the night at my best friend Leia's house. We'd been close since middle school, and by our junior year in high school, it was pretty much routine. Friday nights at her place, Saturdays at mine. Her parents were definitely stricter than mine, but they liked me well enough, and I think they just saw me as being harmless. Their house was located a few miles outside of Knoxville, down a long, winding dirt road that twisted its way between tobacco fields and open pastures. It was the kind of place where neighbors lived half a mile apart from each other, and the nights were so quiet that you could hear the crickets chirping through closed windows. The first thing I noticed when I got there wasn't the house itself, though it was the shed. It squatted on the far edge of the yard. Past the clothesline and the vegetable garden stood the shed. It was weather-beaten, the paint peeling off in sad curls, and the roof sagged just a bit in the middle. At first glance, it looked like every other shed I'd ever laid eyes on. But when I took a closer look, I noticed the lock, a heavy iron padlock, old and scarred with rust. I remember asking without even thinking, "What's in there?" Leia's smile wavered for a second. "Just storage," she muttered, tossing her backpack onto the porch. Then, her voice sharper, she said, "Don't go near it." She said it like she was warning me about something seriously dangerous. That night, her family sat down to dinner. Fried chicken, cornbread, and green beans, fresh from the garden. Her father said, "Grace?" His voice steady and stern. But halfway through the meal, I noticed his eyes flick toward the window behind me, toward the shed. His jaw tightened just for a second before he looked back down at his plate. "You girls stay close to the house tonight," he said, his tone flat. "And don't let me catch you nosing around out back." The words landed heavy, like a rule you just didn't break. Period. Leia didn't say anything. She just stared at her food, pushing beans around with her fork. Her mom kept her hands folded neatly in her lap, nodding like she'd heard the same warning 1,000 times before. I thought it was weird, but I didn't push it. Families had their quirks, you know. Later that night, though, I woke up to a sound that made my blood run cold. At first, I thought it was just the wind creaking through the trees, but then I realized it was coming from outside, drifting through the open bedroom window. A voice, faint, cracked, and crying. I sat up in the dark, straining to hear. It was soft, almost like someone trying not to be heard, but it was definitely there. Muffled sobs drifting from the direction of the shed. I whispered, "Leia, do you hear that?" Her body went rigid beside me. She didn't roll over, didn't even open her eyes. She just whispered back, sharp and quick, "Go back to sleep." But I couldn't. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, ears straining. The crying went on and off until just before dawn, when everything finally fell silent. The next morning at breakfast, I almost brought it up. I opened my mouth, but then I saw Leia's mom's face. She looked totally exhausted, her eyes red like she hadn't slept either. When her husband asked her to pass the butter, She flinched like the scrape of the knife on the plate was just too loud, so I kept my mouth shut. The second weekend, I stayed over. It happened again. This time, it wasn't just crying. It was words, low, broken whispers that I couldn't quite make out. I crept to the window and pressed my ear against the screen. The night was so still I could hear my own heartbeat. Then, clear as day, the sound cut through please. Just one word, hoarse, fragile. I stumbled back, my skin crawling. I turned to Leia. "There's someone out there." Her face went pale. She shook her head hard. Don't ever say that again." Her voice cracked on the last word. By the third weekend, curiosity outweighed fear. During the day, when her parents were busy, her mom hanging laundry, her dad bent under the hood of his truck, I wandered toward the garden. The closer I got to the shed, the worse the smell hit me. Not strong, not like garbage, but sour, damp, like mildew and sweat. I took one step onto the patch of dirt in front of the door and froze. From the other side, something shifted. A scrape of movement, light but deliberate. Then a whisper so faint, I thought I imagined it. "Help me." I froze when I heard that whisper. My breath caught in my throat, and every nerve in my body screamed at me to run. But my feet stayed planted in the dirt. The shed door rattled softly, like weak fingers brushing against it from the inside. "Please," the voice said again. I backed away so fast I nearly tripped over the garden hose. When I spun around, Leia was standing on the porch, staring at me with wide, furious eyes. She shook her head once, violently, her mouth forming a silent no. That night, she wouldn't speak to me, not as we brushed our teeth, not when we climbed into bed. I lay there listening, waiting, and sure enough, the crying started again. Muffled, broken, but this time, Leia buried her head under the covers and sobbed quietly until she fell asleep. By the next morning, I couldn't keep quiet anymore. As we walked down the dirt road toward the bus stop, I whispered, "Who's in there?" She froze, her backpack hanging off one shoulder. She didn't look at me when she said, "He used to be my brother." My blood ran cold. "Used to be." Her voice cracked. "They said he wasn't right. Said he embarrassed the family. They locked him out there when I was little, and they never let him back in." I stared at her, stunned. "How long?" She cut me off, eyes burning. "Don't ask. Just don't. If they know you know, they'll make me go in there, too." I wanted to argue, but the look on her face silenced me. That weekend, I couldn't stay away. While Leia was in the shower, I snuck outside with a bobby pin from her dresser. The padlock was old, stiff, but after 10 shaky minutes of fumbling, I heard it click open. The smell hit me first, sour, suffocating. Then the door creaked, and my heart nearly stopped. Inside, crouched in the shadows, was a boy, older than me, maybe 19, but gaunt and skeletal. His hair hung in greasy clumps, his skin pale and covered in sores. His eyes darted toward the light like an animal's. "Help me," he rasped, his voice cracked and dry. I whispered, "I will. I'll get you out." His lips trembled, and for the first time, I saw the faintest flicker of hope in his face. But then a voice roared behind me. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Leia's father stormed across the yard, his boots pounding the dirt. My hand shook so badly I dropped the lock. He yanked me backward by the arm, hard enough to wrench my shoulder. "You stay away from here," he bellowed, spittle hitting my face. "You hear me? This ain't your business." The boy inside whimpered, curling into the corner like a dog expecting a beating. Leia stood frozen on the porch, tears streaming down her face. Her mother stood behind her, clutching the doorframe, lips pressed tight as if holding in a scream. Her father dragged me across the yard, shoved me into the house, and hissed, "You say one word about this to anyone, and I'll bury you out there with him." I never argued. I never went back. But I can't forget the last thing I saw before the door slammed shut. The boy, Leia's brother, reaching weakly toward me, his lips forming the same word over and over, "Help." The first time I went to Tyler's house for a sleepover, I just thought his family was a little quirky. They had this 2-story home on a quiet street in Cincinnati, the kind of neighborhood where every lawn was edged perfectly and porch lights glowed warm after dark. Inside, everything looked totally normal. Family photos on the walls, soft piano music playing in the background, the smell of spaghetti sauce drifting from the kitchen. But then I saw the lamp. It was mounted high on the wall in the upstairs hallway, right above the bedroom doors. A traffic light, a real one, green, yellow, red, wired into the wall like it belonged there. I laughed when I noticed it. "What is this, you guys controlling traffic in your house?" Tyler didn't laugh. His little sister glanced at it nervously and hurried into her room. Tyler muttered, "Don't worry about it." His voice was tight, not joking at all. At dinner that night, I noticed the way his parents watched us, not like normal parents asking about school or sports, but watching to make sure we said the right things. His mom asked polite questions about my family, my grades. His dad didn't say much at all, but when he did, it was final. No elbows on the table. Eat slower. Chew properly. Every time he spoke, Tyler and his sister froze, adjusted, nodded. I remember thinking, wow, they're strict. But nothing prepared me for what happened after. We were carrying our plates to the sink when his dad walked over to a little switch on the wall near the kitchen. He flicked it, and upstairs the hallway lamp clicked on, glowing green. The whole mood in the house shifted. Tyler stood straighter. His sister whispered, "Green means we're fine." I frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Neither of them answered. Later that night, we went up to his room to play video games. I asked again about the traffic light. Tyler closed the door, lowered his voice, and finally explained. "It's the rules. Green means you can talk normal. Yellow means whisper only. Red." He swallowed hard. "Red means silence. Absolute silence." I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he grabbed my arm. His fingers dug in harder than I expected. "I'm not kidding. If it's red, you don't say anything. Don't move around. Don't even flush the toilet. Got it?" His eyes told me he wasn't lying. At 9:00, the green light clicked to yellow. I heard it before I saw it. A faint mechanical buzz through the walls, followed by the glow under his door, shifting from soft green to muted amber. Tyler froze mid-sentence. His sister pattered past our door, head down, walking like her feet weighed 100 pounds. "Whisper," Tyler mouthed. I whispered back, "Seriously?" He nodded, his face pale. At 10:00, the light clicked again. Red. The whole house went silent. Not just quiet. Silent. I've never felt anything like it. No TV downstairs, no dishes clinking, not even the creak of footsteps. The air was heavy, pressing in on me. I whispered, "So, what happens if you talk?" Tyler's eyes went wide. He shook his head violently. "Don't. Please." I shut my mouth. We lay on the floor, pretending to watch the muted game screen, but my eyes kept drifting to the crack under the door, where the red glow bled into the room. The silence stretched on, so unnatural it made my ears ring. An hour passed, then another. I couldn't sleep. Every small noise, the whir of the fridge, the tick of the clock, felt deafening. And then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, climbing the stairs. Tyler stiffened beside me. We both held our breath. The footsteps reached his door and stopped. The handle rattled once. A low voice came through the wood. His father's. Calm, cold, not a sound. I lay frozen, my heart slamming against my ribs until the footsteps faded back down the hall. I thought I could finally breathe when another sound cut through the silence, muffled crying from his sister's room. The sobs grew louder, then cut off suddenly, like someone had silenced her by force. The red light stayed on until morning. The next morning, I tried to convince myself I'd dreamed it. Maybe the crying was just the pipes. Maybe the silence just made me imagine things. But when I looked at Tyler and his sister at breakfast, I knew I hadn't imagined a thing. Both of them had red, puffy eyes. They moved like ghosts, silent, watching their parents for cues before lifting their forks or sipping milk. No one mentioned the night, not a word. That should have been enough for me to say I was sick, ask to go home, and never come back. But I didn't. I told myself it was just a strange house rule, strict parents. That night, I stayed again. At 9 Huzra, the green light clicked to yellow. At 10 Ezra, it bled red across the hallway. The silence settled in heavier than before. I tried whispering, "This is insane. Why do you let them do this?" Tyler's face went white. He grabbed my arm so hard it hurt, shaking his head violently. His lips mouthed the same words as the night before, "Don't, please." Then the footsteps came again, heavy, deliberate. But this time, they didn't stop at his door. They kept going past his room, past the bathroom, stopping at his sister's door. The handle rattled. Her door opened. The faint red glow spilled across the hall, and I could see just enough through the crack of our door her father's silhouette, tall and unmoving, and his voice, calm and terrifying in the silence. Red means silence. You know that. Her sobs leaked into the hall, soft and pitiful. Then the door shut, muffling it again. I lay frozen on the floor, my heart pounding, sweat soaking through my shirt. I wanted to scream, to run, to call someone, but Tyler's nails dug into my arm. He whispered so softly I almost didn't hear, "If we move, he'll come in here." The red light burned all night. By dawn, my nerves were shot. I couldn't eat breakfast, couldn't look Tyler's parents in the eye. When my mom came to pick me up, I nearly cried with relief. But here's the part that still haunts me. As I was leaving, Tyler's sister came to the window. The sun was rising, painting the curtains gold, but her face was pale, her eyes swollen. She lifted one hand slowly, pressing her fingers to the glass like she wanted me to take her with me. Behind her, down the hallway, the lamp clicked red again, and she dropped her hand. That was the last time I ever stayed there. I never told anyone what I saw, not until years later. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is too quiet, I see that red glow in my mind. And I know there are families out there where silence isn't peace, it's punishment. Unlock it. That was the first thing my dad said when I walked through the door. Not hello, not how was work, not even a glance at the takeout bag I was holding. Just those two words, clipped, sharp, already in order. He meant my phone. I slid it out of my pocket, thumb hovering over the screen. For a second, I thought about refusing, just once. But then I caught the look in his eyes, cold, expectant, a reminder that in this house, it wasn't mine. Nothing was. By 19, I thought I'd earned some freedom. I'd finished my first year of college. I worked shifts at a coffee shop. I even paid for my own gas. But in my parents' living room, none of that mattered. I was still their kid, and kids didn't get privacy. The audit started the first week I came home for summer. Every night at 10 sharp, we gathered in the living room, my mom on the left side of the couch, my dad on the right, me in the middle, like some defendant in court. The first night, I thought it was a one-off. My mom said she wanted to catch up, to see who I'd been talking to at school, but it wasn't casual. She asked for my phone unlocked and handed it straight to my dad. He scrolled through my messages, frowning, humming, asking questions I didn't even know how to answer. Who's Katie a friend? What kind of friend? Just a friend. That should have been the end of it, but the next night at 10 o'clock, they called me down again, and the night after, and every night after that. By the second week, I realized it was a ritual. My dad handled the scrolling. My mom handled the commentary. Every text, every picture, every call log was fair game. If they didn't understand something, they demanded I explain it. If they thought I was hiding something, that made it even worse. The notebook. At first, it was just scraps of paper, my dad jotting down names and times, but soon it became a black spiral notebook kept on the coffee table, always within reach. He logged everything who texted me, when, what they said, and how I responded. Tyler, my best friend since middle school, got flagged for immaturity because he sent me memes. Katie got flagged as a distraction from school. Jacob, who I'd only ever worked a shift with, was marked verify possible relationship. It wasn't just control, it was a case file. One night, my mom tapped the screen and frowned. You sent 3 laughing faces here. Why? I shrugged. Because it was funny. Or because you were covering up guilt, she said. My dad nodded like she'd solved something. He wrote it down. That night, I deleted entire conversations before the audit. When my dad saw the empty thread, he didn't get angry. He smiled. He leaned back and said, "Deleting things only makes you look guilty." I felt my stomach twist. I couldn't win. Another night, I tried locking my phone with a passcode. My dad held out his hand at 10:02 and said calmly, "If you don't unlock it, you can find somewhere else to live." I unlocked it. It wasn't just the texts. They combed through Spotify playlists, accusing me of hiding meanings in the songs. They questioned why I used my camera at certain times, demanded to know what I'd been photographing. They checked location history like it was a diary. Every laugh, every pause, every word became ammunition. The living room became a courtroom. The notebook became a record, and I became nothing more than evidence. That night, as my mom flipped through a group chat with my friends, reading every joke out loud like it was a crime, I stared at the notebook, pages of names, pages of commentary, pages of my life, stripped down and categorized, and I realized something that made my skin crawl. This wasn't just for them. They were keeping it for later. I thought the notebook was bad enough, but I was wrong. The notebook wasn't the end. It was the beginning. By the 4th week of the audits, my parents stopped pretending it was about safety. My mom started calling it record keeping. My dad called it evidence. Evidence for what I didn't know. One Friday night after a late shift at work, I walked in to find the notebook open on the table and my phone already in my dad's hand. My stomach dropped. "Why were you at the river?" he asked. I blinked. "What?" He turned the phone toward me. A location pin from a photo I'd posted. A group selfie me, Katie, and a few others on the bank at sunset. "You didn't tell us you were going there," my mom said. "Because it wasn't important." She leaned forward, her eyes bright in a way that scared me. "Everything is important." That night, they wrote 2 full pages. They dissected every person in that photo, speculated on who was leading me astray, what temptations I was hiding, and then it happened. The next morning, my mom's Facebook lit up with a new post screenshots of my texts, cropped, highlighted, captioned. She wrote, "Parents, watch what your children are doing. Secrets don't protect them. They destroy them." Katie texted me 5 minutes later, "Why is your mom posting our messages?" My chest caved in. They weren't just reading my life. They were broadcasting it. That night's audit was worse. My mom sat with her phone in her lap, scrolling through comments on her post. Other parents chimed in, praising her for being brave, for protecting the community. She smiled like she'd won something. And my dad. He turned the notebook toward me, pages and pages filled with names, numbers, locations. "We're going to keep you clean," he said. His voice was calm. "Final. Even if the whole world knows what you've done." I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab the notebook, rip it to shreds, smash my phone, and run. But my legs felt glued to the carpet. That night, after they went to bed, I crept downstairs. The notebook was still on the table. I flipped through it in the glow of my phone flashlight. My name, my friends' names, times, dates, private conversations annotated like criminal reports. Whole pages with nothing but the word liar scrawled in the margins. My hands shook. I tore out one page and stuffed it into my pocket. Just one. Proof. The next morning, my dad slammed it down in front of me. The missing page. He'd found the gap. "You can't hide from us," he said. "Not anymore." I left the house that day and never went back. I slept on Katie's couch until I scraped together enough money for my own place. I blocked their numbers, their emails, everything. But here's the part that keeps me up at night. 2 months later, a friend sent me a link, a parenting blog, anonymous posts about keeping kids accountable. And there it was, my texts, my photos, even parts of my journal I'd thought were private. My parents had uploaded it all. My life, my words, my secrets, public forever. And even now, years later, sometimes I wake up at night, reaching for my phone, terrified I'll hear my dad's voice again, calm and cold, saying the same words he said every night, "Unlock it." When I came home from my first semester of college, I expected things to be different. I'd grown used to eating late-night pizza in the dorms, crashing on friends' futons, living on my own schedule. Coming back to my parents' house felt like stepping into a time capsule, the same creaky banister, the same heavy curtains, the same faint smell of lemon polish clinging to the wood floors. Even dinner looked the same at first. My mom's roast chicken was already on the table when I walked in, steam curling above mashed potatoes and green beans. My dad was in his usual spot at the head of the table, the TV off for once. Hannah, my younger sister, sat across from me, already piling food onto her plate. She grinned when she saw me, like she was happy I was home. For a moment, I felt normal again. Then I noticed my place setting, or rather, the lack of one. My mom laid out 3 plates, one for Hannah, one for my dad, one for herself. Forks, knives, glasses. Perfect. And then she sat down. I looked at the empty space in front of me and chuckled. "Guess I'm invisible now. Did you forget me?" Nobody laughed. My dad started carving the chicken, the knife scraping hard against bone. My mom adjusted her napkin on her lap. Hannah glanced at me, then quickly looked away. "Mom," I tried again, glancing toward the cabinets. "You're missing one." She finally looked at me, calm, even gentle. "Not yet," she said. I frowned. "Not yet what?" "Not until you're ready to be honest." The words hit me sideways. Honest about what? She didn't answer. My dad passed her the potatoes, and dinner carried on without me. At first, I thought maybe it was a joke, some weird way of telling me they knew about the C I'd gotten in chemistry or that I'd skipped a class here and there, but it wasn't funny. I sat there the entire meal, stomach growling while the smell of roast chicken filled the room and the sound of forks on porcelain grated on my. That night, I went to bed feeling deeply uneasy, but I tried to convince myself that this was just a one-time punishment, an isolated incident. Maybe tomorrow things would go back to normal, but they didn't. The second night, I came downstairs to the dinner table ravenous, already savoring the thought of the food. Once again, there were only 3 plates, and my spot remained conspicuously empty. I plopped down in a chair, a knot forming in my stomach. Okay, this isn't funny anymore. Where's my dinner? My mom didn't even glance at me. She calmly spooned vegetables onto her own plate. Confession first. What confession? The truth, she said softly, with a faint, unsettling smile. It always feels better to get it off your chest. My dad chewed his food slowly, his eyes locked on me, but he didn't utter a single word. I don't have anything to confess. My voice cracked, betraying my anxiety. Hannah flinched slightly, her fork hovering in midair, but she remained silent. The dinner dragged on, each bite they took twisting my stomach tighter and tighter. By the third night, I was already lightheaded from hunger. The aroma of freshly baked bread wafted through the kitchen, a cruel temptation. I nearly begged when I saw the familiar setup of 3 plates. This has to stop. Just tell me what you think I did. My dad finally looked up, his gaze piercing. If you weren't hiding something, you'd already have a plate. My mom reached across the table and gently brushed her fingers against mine. Sweetheart, don't make this harder on yourself than it needs to be. The sooner you admit it, the sooner you'll get to eat. I yanked my hand back, my throat suddenly dry and constricted. Admit what? They said nothing, just continued eating, their silence a heavy weight in the room. The 4th night, desperate, I tried to take some food anyway. I reached for the serving spoon, but my dad's hand clamped down on my wrist like a vice. His grip was like iron, his voice low and menacing. Not until you're clean. I jerked back, my heart pounding in my chest. Hannah's eyes darted back and forth between us, wide with fear. She nervously took another bite of chicken, not daring to say a word. By the 5th night, my body ached with gnawing hunger. My head throbbed, and my stomach felt like it was eating itself. At 200 a.m., I staggered into the kitchen, desperate for anything to eat. Crackers, cereal, even leftovers. But when I tried to open the pantry door, it wouldn't budge. A shiny new padlock secured it shut. The fridge had also been chained, the gleaming metal a stark reminder of my captivity. Every morsel of food in the house was under their complete control. I crept back upstairs empty-handed, my legs shaky and weak, my throat burning with thirst. And that's when I heard it. Through the thin wall separating my room from Hannah's, I heard a voice, soft and hushed, almost like she was praying. I told them everything. That's why I get to eat. I pressed my ear against the wall, my heart pounding in my chest. She whispered again, her voice steady and unwavering, like a mantra. I told them everything. And in that moment, the truth finally dawned on me. This wasn't about food at all. It was about breaking me down, wearing me down until I confessed to whatever they wanted, real or imagined. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Hannah's voice echoing in my head. soft and steady through the wall. I told them everything. That's why I get to eat. Her words echoed in my mind, tormenting me more intensely than the hunger pangs. What had she told them? What everything was she referring to by morning? I stumbled into the kitchen, dizzy and weak, my tongue thick with thirst. Hannah was at the counter, finishing a bowl of cereal, and my stomach cramped just from watching her eat. "Hannah," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "What did you tell them?" She froze, her spoon halfway to her mouth. Her eyes darted nervously toward the living room, where our parents were sitting and drinking coffee. Then she leaned in close, her voice so faint I could barely hear it. "Whatever they wanted." Before I could ask her to elaborate, our mom walked in. Hannah immediately straightened up, her eyes wide with apprehension, and carried her bowl to the sink without saying another word. That night at dinner, I decided to try a different approach. My mom set out 3 plates as usual. My place remained empty. My dad poured water into his glass. The sound amplified in the tense silence. I clenched my fists, trying to control my rising anger. "Fine. You want honesty. Here it is. I skipped some classes. I drank at a party once. I spent too much money. Is that what you wanted to hear?" My mom tilted her head, a faint, unsettling smile playing on her lips. "Closer, closer." My voice cracked, betraying my desperation. "What else do you want?" "Everything," my dad said flatly, his voice devoid of emotion. My chest tightened, making it difficult to breathe. "I just told you everything." "No, my mom said, dabbing her mouth delicately with her napkin. "You told us what you think we wanted to hear. There's more. There's always more." I pushed my chair back so forcefully that it screeched against the floor. "There isn't." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Hannah stared down at her plate, tears silently slipping down her cheeks as she lifted another forkful of potatoes. My mom's smile never wavered. "You'll confess when you're ready, sweetheart." Then she gestured towards my bare placemat. "Until then, you'll stay hungry." By the 7th night, my head was pounding relentlessly. My stomach felt like a pit of burning fire. I made another attempt to sneak some food, but the locks were still there, gleaming and impenetrable. I even tried begging Hannah to share, but she wouldn't even look at me. Her plate was always piled high with food. On the 8th night, I finally broke. I slammed my fists against the table, my voice raw with anguish. "I don't know what you want from me." My dad's fork clattered against his plate. He stood up, towering over me, his expression calm yet terrifying. "We want the truth." "I gave you the truth." My vision started to blur. "I don't have anything else to give." My mom leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with a strange light. "Then make something up." Her words froze me in place, sending a chill down my spine. Make something up. That's exactly what Hannah had done. That's why she was being rewarded with food. It wasn't about the truth at all. It was about submission, about surrendering completely to their will. My mom reached across the table and gently stroked my hand, as if I were a small child again. "Once you understand that, darling, you'll never go hungry here again." I pulled my hand back, shaking uncontrollably, bile rising in my throat. I stumbled away from the table, past Hannah's silent tears, past my father's cold, unwavering gaze, and ran upstairs to my room. That was the last night I spent in that house. I left the next morning with nothing but the clothes on my back, my stomach hollow and my body weak. But I knew that hunger was far better than what they wanted from me. Better than selling myself piece by piece until there was nothing authentic left. I still hear Hannah's whisper sometimes when I try to fall asleep, those haunting words echoing in my mind. I told them everything. That's why I get to eat. And the worst part is that a part of me still wonders if she's sitting at that table, night after night, inventing sins just to keep her plate full. When I came home for break at 19, I desperately hoped that dinner would be the one normal aspect of my parents' house, a comforting routine amidst the chaos. But I was wrong. The table was meticulously arranged, almost sterile in its perfection. Forks were precisely aligned, glasses were filled to the exact same height, and plates were polished to a blinding shine. My mom moved with quiet, almost robotic precision, setting everything down as if it were part of a carefully choreographed performance. My dad sat at the head of the table, his ever-present black leather notebook resting ominously beside his plate. My younger brother, Evan, sat across from me, his eyes downcast, nervously chewing on his lip, and in the center of the table, as if it had always belonged there, lay my mom's phone. The screen was unlocked, displaying the contacts list, and my stomach churned with a familiar sense of dread. I had almost forgotten about the call list, a twisted ritual that had started 2 years earlier, just before I left for college. My dad had claimed that too many kids my age were being corrupted by false friends. He declared that loyalty was the very foundation of family, the glue that held everything together. To prove our unwavering loyalty, he had invented this bizarre and unsettling ritual. Every night at dinner, one of us had to randomly select someone from our contacts list and call them on speakerphone, subjecting them to a bizarre and uncomfortable audition. The goal was deceptively simple: prove that our friends answered our calls, that they respected us, and that they spoke in a way that met with my parents' approval. If they failed in any of these arbitrary criteria, if they were too slow to answer, too distracted during the conversation, or too casual in their tone, my parents would meticulously record it in the ledger. Names, dates, and the nature of their perceived infractions were all carefully documented. At first, I thought the whole thing was completely insane and utterly humiliating, but eventually, it became something far more sinister and terrifying, because the more names that went into the ledger, the fewer friends I had left. That night, my dad slid the phone across the table towards me, the screen glowing in the dim light like a malevolent beacon. Call! I hesitantly scrolled through my contacts, my thumb hovering nervously over names that suddenly felt dangerous, fraught with potential consequences. Tyler. He used to be my best friend, but after my parents wrote him up for immaturity, he had stopped responding to my texts and calls. Katie, maybe. She was usually quick to answer, but even that felt like a gamble. The silence at the table was thick and suffocating, pressing down on me like a physical weight. My mom offered a faint, unsettling smile, and I knew that my dad's pen was already poised above the open notebook, ready to document my every move. I tapped on Katie's name, steeling myself for what was to come. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. I felt beads of sweat forming on the back of my neck. Then, finally, a click. Hey. Katie's voice burst through the speaker, sounding bright and normal, completely unaware of the tension that filled the room. A wave of relief washed over me. Hey, just checking in. Checking in. You okay? She asked, her concern evident in her voice. I forced a nervous laugh. Yeah, fine. Just wanted to say hi. When I hung up, my mom's smile seemed to tighten, becoming less genuine. Her tone was subtly off, hinting at some unspoken disapproval. My dad nodded slowly, writing something in the notebook. Suspicious. No, it wasn't. I started to protest, but his sharp glare silenced me instantly. Evan's hands were visibly shaking as the phone slid across the table to him. He scrolled quickly through his contacts, nervously choosing a classmate. The boy answered the call, but his voice was rushed and distracted, and a cacophony of background noise spilled into the room. "Too distracted," my mom whispered, her voice laced with disapproval. "Not respectful," my dad added, meticulously writing it down in the ledger. Evan's face crumpled, but he didn't say a word, already resigned to his fate. That was just the first night. By the third night, I began to realize just how far this twisted game went, how deeply it had permeated our lives. Dinner was a tense and silent affair until the phone was inevitably slid towards me again. My hands trembled as I picked another name, desperately hoping that this time someone would answer quickly and without any perceived infractions. This time, I chose a girl from my English class, praying that she would pick up quickly and say the right things. She did answer, but when she laughed at something I said, my dad's pen scratched harshly against the page. "Mockery," he muttered, his tone disapproving. "Not a true friend," my mom agreed, adding to the oppressive atmosphere of the room. I wanted to scream, to lash out at them and shatter the suffocating silence. Instead, I hung up the phone and stared at the ledger, the pages filled with my perceived failures, page after page of names, each one branded with some invented sin: disrespectful, rushed, distracting, untrustworthy. By the fifth night, Evan finally cracked under the pressure. He called an old friend from school, and when the boy didn't answer, the phone ringing out into dead air, my parents stared at him as if he had committed a heinous crime. "Strike," my dad said coldly, his voice devoid of any emotion as he wrote it down in the ledger. Evan whispered, his voice barely audible. "He was probably busy." My mom shook her head slowly, her expression almost pitying. "No one's too busy for loyalty." Evan's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded obediently anyway, already broken by their relentless manipulation. I couldn't bring myself to eat. The food sat untouched on my plate, each bite tasting like ashes in my mouth. The air was so thick with silence and unspoken tension that I felt like I was suffocating. That night, I lay in bed staring up at the ceiling, my stomach twisting with anxiety and dread. I couldn't stop thinking about the list, about the ledger, about how many friends' names were already crossed out of my life, erased by my parents' twisted rules. And that's when it hit me, the chilling realization of their true motive. This wasn't about proving loyalty at all. It was about isolation, about cutting us off from the outside world, piece by piece, call by call. They were systematically stripping us down, isolating us until the only voices left in our lives would be theirs. The only opinions we valued would be their own. And the worst part was that I knew that tomorrow night they would hand me the phone again, forcing me to participate in their sick game. By the sixth night, I felt like I was unraveling, coming apart at the seams. Every meal had turned into a carefully orchestrated performance, a minefield of potential missteps. Every ring of the phone sent another jolt of fear through my body, another drop of sweat sliding down my back. I barely spoke during the day anymore, knowing that anything I said could be twisted and used as evidence in my parents' ledger, another justification for their control. That night, my dad tapped his pen rhythmically against the notebook, the sound sharp and steady, a constant reminder of the judgment that hung over us. "Call." The phone slid across the table towards me, and I picked it up with trembling hands. I scrolled through my contacts, but most of the names blurred together now. A sea of potential betrayals. People who had stopped answering my calls. People I hadn't dared to call in weeks for fear of the consequences. People who had already been erased from my parents' good graces. Evan's fork clinked nervously against his plate, the sound amplified in the tense silence. His face was pale, his lips trembling. He had lost 3 friends in 3 nights, and I could see how hollow he looked, how the light had been drained from his eyes. My mom leaned forward, Her smile stretched tight and unnatural. Pick wisely. My thumb hovered over Katie's name again, but I knew the truth deep down. It didn't matter who I picked. They would always find something wrong, some perceived flaw or imperfection. A pause that was too long, a laugh that sounded too casual, a word that was said in the wrong tone. Every call was a trap, a carefully constructed scenario designed to break us down, and I knew that I couldn't keep playing their game. For a split second, my hand shook so violently that I thought I was going to drop the phone. Then, before I could think better of it, I tapped in 3 numbers. 911. The line clicked almost instantly, and a calm, professional voice answered. 911. What's your emergency? The room went completely silent, every breath held in anticipation. My dad barked out a harsh, humorless laugh. Cute. She thinks she's clever. My mom's smile widened, almost amused by my defiance. Go ahead, tell them. They won't believe you. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. My voice shook as I spoke. I'm being forced. My parents. My dad slammed his fist against the table, rattling the dishes and sending a shockwave through the room. Evan flinched at the sudden outburst. End the call. But I didn't hang up. I pressed the speaker icon and set the phone down in the center of the table, defying them openly. The dispatcher's calm, reassuring voice filled the silence. Ma'am, are you safe right now? My mom chuckled softly, shaking her head in disbelief. They'll never believe you. You're just a child. But the voice on the line didn't waver, remained steady and focused. Units are on their way. Stay on the call with me. My dad's face twisted red with rage, his eyes burning with fury. He reached for the phone, but I grabbed it first, clutching it tightly to my chest. They make us call people every night, I said, my voice breaking with emotion. They write it all down in a ledger. And they're trying to cut us off from everyone. Evan's chair scraped back against the floor as he stood up, tears streaming down his face. It's true, he whispered, his voice raw with pain. It's all true. For the first time, my mom's carefully constructed smile faltered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. The dispatcher's voice was calm, steady, but filled with a sense of urgency. Stay where you are. Do not hang up. My dad lunged for the phone again, but at that very moment, headlights swept across the curtains outside, casting long shadows across the room. A car door slammed shut, followed by another. The pounding on the front door was deafening, louder than my own racing heartbeat. Police. My parents froze, their faces masks of shock and disbelief. Evan grabbed my arm, his nails digging into my skin. But for once, I didn't mind the pain, because when the door burst open and the officers stepped inside, their flashlights cutting through the suffocating darkness of that dining room, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Relief. The ledger was confiscated, the phone taken as evidence. My parents shouted, raged, and desperately tried to spin their own version of the story. But none of it mattered anymore. For once, someone outside of that house had heard the truth, had believed us. That night, sitting in the back of a police car with Evan's head resting against my shoulder, I realized that the cycle of abuse was finally broken. The calls were over. The ledger was closed. And as the dispatcher's calm, steady, and believing voice echoed in my head, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long that it almost hurt. Hope.